Frishman for you.
Thank you, everybody. Well, I know there's a column in the way, we can't help that, but I'll do the best I can. So today, we're gonna do a couple things. First, I'm gonna show you just a taste of my personal collection, which is called Catskill tchotchkes, and I've done this. This is 4.0. There's always more things to add. I'm always getting more in my collection. And the second part will be some selected features from the 2 books that I've written, and they're for sale afterwards. They're $20 each. You buy a book, you get a menu from the Concord Hotel. Special deal today. If you buy 2, I get you a room in the Laurels Hotel. Does everybody know what the Borscht Belt is or was? Okay, that was the area, and we're going to go through that because a lot of people have said, how come this new museum is in Ellenville? It should be in Sullivan County. We're going to go through that, and I'm going to show you some historical reasons. But let's start with some of the items. So my family, we were plumbers. My dad was a plumber. My grandfather, I was a bungalow plumber. Okay, and there's a big difference. Okay, I did not learn heating and the stuff that my dad knew because he was a real plumber. I knew that shit ran downhill and you make it work for 9 weeks. That's it. You couldn't fix it permanently because it would cost too much money. And initially, bungalows were built on anything right on the ground. So they were always moving, which always messed up the plumbing, blew it apart, never drained right. And those are my basic lessons. So we were bungalow plumbers. We didn't do much in the hotels. And this was a typical, actually, this is a nice sign, came from Cutler's Cottages, and bungalows for rent. Now here's another one. This guy, it was interesting. You can't tell from the photograph, but where it says for 1968, initially it was painted. Then it got this green reflective tape, and he cut it out because it was too cheap to have it painted back on, but it served its purpose. Now this guy was not too good at English. Okay. That is my favorite now renting sign of all, and what could I say? Now, if you were a member in good standing of owning a bungalow colony, you belong to the Bungalow and Rooming Association. This is a porcelain sign that I was able to find a stack of them in a basement. And I should also explain that people say, how did you get this collection of stuff? Luckily, I was a building inspector for about 24 years. I got to go in a lot of abandoned hotels, buildings, someone's basement, and I'd see something and I'd say, hey, you want to sell that? I don't even know what it is. You want it? It would be that kind of thing. So things that people were throwing out, I had an eye for that, and I saved it. And you'll see a couple of those items. So if, as I said, if you remember in good standing, you got the second plate on the bottom, 1953. And then there were tourist homes where if you just wanted to rent a room for the weekend, these signs were all over also. This is just a shot of an old pump, hand pump that I found. The handle is from another pump. It's not connected, but it just shows people that came to my house to visit how we used to get water. And I'm sure there's a couple people in here that remember the old hand pumps. I don't know where to stand, not to block anybody and be in the screen. This is like, you know, okay, maybe that's a little better. You know what? Let's try this. Is that better? All right. I can do this. So this is an advertisement from a very old farmhouse, and that's the way a lot of the places started when the Jews came to Sullivan County. At first, they weren't allowed here, and there was no Jews, no dogs, and no, the word escapes me, you couldn't have people that had tuberculosis. Consumptives, took me a second, it's taken me a couple seconds nowadays. Consumptives were not allowed, and we were part of that group. And it's funny that in some cases, dogs got a better standing than we do. Anyway, this is a kosher place owned by Mr. Berger, and you can see right on the Village Farmhouse. I don't know what the first word is, the second word is kosher, so I'm thinking it's dietary kosher, because that's how you knew that it was a kosher hotel. Are we on the screen at all?
I got it.
we're zooming at the same time, so it's a challenge to.
You're
get
good
it
where
to
you're
work.
sitting. You're good.
All right, I don't see it, maybe you do.
Yep.
Okay. And the nice thing about this is it gives you directions on how to get to the place from the O and W Railroad. And does anybody know where they should know where what the railroad station became in South Fallsburg? The police station, Village Hall, exactly. So that was repurposed. And there's a couple of train stations still standing, Hurleyville. Trying to think of the other one. We built one in Mount Air. So there are a couple that are still standing, which is nice. So this is a model that I made for the Bungalow Museum. And it's a detailed model of showing what the bungalows look like, because some people have no idea. And let me just try to zoom in on this. It does have some details where you have the screened-in porches, very tiny little table, maybe 2 chairs you could stick in because you're walking from one door into the next. And, you know, it was a duplex bungalow and right down the middle. And I'm going to try to use the pointer, which would be amazing. So, I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. Let's see, maybe it'll disappear. Oh, good. So on the right porch, you could see that I used the real stone to set the foundation on. I couldn't do that on the whole house; it would fall over. I really had to have something secure. But that's the way they built stuff, wherever they wanted on stones, and that's why the bungalows always move. Okay. Back to this. And this is sort of in between modern day construction, but Catskill construction, and you can see that they needed 3 pieces because the post was too short. So they kept sticking in some wood to level off the porch. I was like, you gotta be kidding. But no, that's for real.
Excuse me, can you move the
And they used
camera?
to
We
build
can't
a
see
handball
your
court
slides.
many times. They built a handball court next to one of the, usually at the casino, because they figured that unit, you know, you could bang the ball against it and nobody would be in it. But actually, this was a rentable unit. They probably got it cheap for the summer. Because all you're gonna hear is boom, 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 you know, when kids are playing and you can't yell at them. Now, this was after, they put the window in after. This is later on, so they weren't using it then. But it was a bungalow at one point, and there's an older crowd there, and they put a window in. Anybody remember Fialkoff's in Monticello?
Yes.
Okay, that's now a kosher bakery. Back in 1968, when I was in a rock and roll band, which was fantastic, and we were playing in 68, we just started playing in Kutcher's, and we would still do gigs in different places in the summer. And we did my band was the New Generation, and we did a show in Monticello. And towards the bottom, you could see a complete psychedelic show. And what was different in my band is we had black lights, we had props, strobe lights, all the things that were popular, like in the city, if you went to a concert, we had it with our band. And wherever we traveled, that was part of the whole show. And I remember a friend of mine told me years later, he said, your music was okay, but you know, some of us were starting to get hot. So your psychedelic show was unbelievable, and that's why we went to see you. I said, I don't care what brought you there, as long as you got there. And yes, we did make it to Woodstock, and you could see the guys with the dove on the guitar right in the middle. Actually, my mom took that photograph. She didn't stay, but she drove the band's van because we couldn't drive standard. So she drove the van. I followed her in the car. We had a spot on, was it Best Avenue? I get the streets mixed up. It was very close. We could almost see the stage, hear the stage. And my mom jumped out and started directing traffic as we were setting up on the ground. And then one of those guys must have come over and said, hey, lady, if you want to leave, you should do it now. Otherwise, you're going to spend the whole week here with your kids. So she took off. So these are a couple stirs, mixers that I just picked up recently. Does anybody know where the Antler Hotel was in North Branch? Antler Hotel, nobody? Still trying to figure. I don't know, that's why I'm asking. Maybe. Also, you got,
Do you think it's another name for the Barn Find Hotel? Because, you know, there were a couple of hotels on that stretch that goes to the T. And they had, did you know the Sinclair House?
I don't know anything about
That
North
was the
Branch.
Barn Find Hotel, so they may have changed the name over time.
Probably, I like the name of the Antler Hotel. And the Crossways was a famous Italian restaurant in South Fallsburg that unfortunately sustained a fire, I think, in the late eighties. And it came to pass that the town bought the property and we made the mini park there in Falls Park there. Now, I do know where the Hunter's Inn was, it's on Old 17. I never went there to drink, but everybody told me, you could be 12 years old and the guy would give you a drink. It didn't matter. I'm told that's the place you learned as a kid to start drinking.
Good steaks, Alan Gary had steak there.
Oh, yeah?
They had good pizza.
Good pizza and cheap drinks. Okay. Anybody remember Squirt Soda? Okay, I see some of the older people going, yeah, I remember that.
There was a squirt factory in Jeffersonville.
It was a what?
There was a squirt factory in Jeffersonville.
Wow.
They bottled it. They bottled it. Squirt.
Because in South Fallsburg, the Bedinsky soda plant bottled Dr. Pepper. And I've got a bunch of the bottles. Actually, this is a crazy story. I had to do an inspection and I'm walking on the property. And I walked behind the property, the building, and I saw a file. It was huge, all green glass bottles. Had Circle A on it, which was the name of his company. But underneath it said South Fallsburg Bottling Plant Dr. Pepper. So back in 1998, when I started on eBay, I sold the bottle for $103. And I was like, I just found my retirement fund. So I grabbed cases of the bottles and brought them to my house. And little by little, though, the people were finding out more and more. eBay got diluted, so to speak. Couldn't get the same money. Now maybe 20 or 30 bucks. Not too bad, but 103 was a record breaker for me. So this is a photo of my back porch. This is what it looks like. It's not a bungalow. Feels like one. And if you look in the center of the picture, you can see the stove and the refrigerator. Sorry. This is tough. Let me go back here. So in the middle of the picture is the stove and the refrigerator. Those items are now in the museum in Ellenville. And when and I had an extra table and that's there too. And when we took them out, my wife said, you got to get something to fill in the space. Well, about a week later, somebody I know was getting rid of some items. So now we got a Kenmore refrigerator and a hot point stove and a Kenmore refrigerator. So we're moving on up. And I did get the stove to work. So that's what we use in the summer because my wife doesn't like the heat that builds up inside. So we cook outside on that stove. The sign on the bottom right, Hotel Zone, is the first sign that I ever collected. And I was like maybe 12, 13 years old, was laying on the side of the road by on the Old Liberty Road near one of my grandparents' bungalow colony, Sedowniks, which is still standing today. It's called Rose Cottages. And I don't know why, but I was always into road signs and graphics. And there's sort of an unwritten rule. You can't take a sign off a pole, but once it hits the ground, you gotta be quick. Now, you probably remember, or you didn't know, if you were younger, why there were receptacles like 7 feet on the wall. And it was a pocket. That was to plug the clocks in. It was specifically made. So wherever that receptacle was in the kitchen, that's where your clock went. And that's a nice old electric clock.
Could you tell what the red button is for?
Yeah, there we go. Parents.
Day and night. I mean, AM, PM.
Power went out, the red button came up,
No kidding.
and you had to reset it back to white. So power's off on that truck.
It's just this.
Been on for 40 years. Wow, thank you. I learned stuff at every one of my seminars. It's great. And of course, we used to get milk in bottles, you know. And back then, if somebody was lost, they couldn't print a picture on the bottle, so we were really screwed. But,
You didn't think it
Carl
was
and Gary
spilled too often.
and
Those bottles have a pocket in the top for the green.
yeah, my brother and I used to fight over that. Because we used to get it from the Oscars. And, you know, for cereal, everybody wanted the cream on top because it wasn't homogenized. Right. Wait a minute. You can tell I use this a lot. So this is there've been a couple maps made of the Catskills. And I didn't know, but I went to this small collector's house. That is actually a puzzle. I didn't even know it existed. So he said, "You need to buy this." I go, "Yeah, I do." And he sold me a couple others. Ellenville has like a Monopoly game. There was something else. So I was pretty surprised to see this, but when I see rare items, I gotta grab them. So this is what I was talking about earlier. This is some book that a friend of mine they bought it at a yard sale. It's in mint condition. It's from 1940, hard to see the date, but it's the Hotelman's Buying Guide. And inside are all these products that if you owned a hotel, that's what you'd want to buy. From pools to food, to tablecloths, whatever it was. But I'm talking about, we're talking about the Borscht Belt. And people, like I said, complain like, how could you have a museum, the Borscht Belt, in Sullivan County, in Ulster County? So that's where Ellenville is. Well, if you look at the map and you look at it carefully, back then, they considered that portion of the Borscht Belt. I mean, it was Greenfield Park, Ulster Heights, had a tremendous number of bungalows along those roads. There were hotels in that area. You had the Neville, actually, I think the Tamarack is right over the edge in Sullivan, but Falls View. So there were a bunch of hotels, and I have explained to people, it's a Borscht Belt Museum. If you want to learn about the reservoirs, you come to this museum. If you want to learn about Sullivan County history, go to the Sullivan County Museum. So we are just focused on the Borscht Belt, and that's why it wound up in Ellenville. This is an interesting piece of ephemera, historical.
It's part of the Borscht Belt.
And the
It's
reason I
spreads
picked it
into
up, it was an ad for
the Hebrew news.
to buy a ticket, and it says in the middle, "Fight Hitler." So they were trying to raise money, of course, for the war efforts. And somebody wrote all over it, but I'm just glad that at least I got that piece. And I was just looking at a box of old papers. I meant Ithaca or something. I'm just looking, I said, "Oh yeah, that's gotta come home with me." This is a nice old pump, and the gasoline used to have lead in it. I guess it was a pollutant, and that's why they took it out. I'm not sure. So you could buy ice cream for 15 cents back then. It was like a big Dixie cup, and that's the lid. Pretty cheap. And then you had Howard Johnson's, and they had 52 flavors. But
Come
they,
on, you guys.
they closed, so the 52
Work on
flavors
your-
didn't help. This I took out of an old hotel, and this is what they used to heat up. This was in the dining room, this was the children's dining room. And they would light these up, and of course, you got carbon monoxide. There was 2 of them pouring into the room, but I don't think anybody worried because there were so many cracks, and you couldn't close the windows that I think enough of the carbon monoxide escaped, so you didn't have to worry about getting poison from it. But it just
Was
the
it
style,
here?
the artwork. That's probably from the 40s, I would guess. And I've got the ceramic bricks that used to glow kind of. from the heat,
Hmm.
propane heat. Look. That's sort of a famous photograph that somebody took years ago. Someplace on Route 17 that advertised tons of signs. Let's see if this is there we go.
Betty, yeah, can't zero in.
So many of them,
Funny.
you know? It's what?
It had to be below Monticello and it's good alternative.
Yes, yes. So I don't know, somebody told me they think it was near either Wurtsboro going up, 17. I'm not sure where. But it's a great photo. Glad they took it. Very classic.
We may have some.
Now in the
things-
hotels, to try to get people to come back the following year, they would send postcards out, kind of like what we do with emails today. And they would give you the rates. They would give you all the information to try to get you to come. So here we have the hotel ambassador. And for
You
two
are
people,
looking up here.
the
It's
bathroom's
much
nearby,
clearer.
the bathroom, which means it was down the hall, you shared it. It was $11, daily rate per person. It's pretty cheap. But everything was cheaper back then.
They're
so
all
it made
filled
sense.
with sedums now. All this
They
full.
wanted you to come up for Memorial Weekend. They wanted you to stay till Labor Day. And everybody remembers who lived up here. Labor Day, boom, this place closed down. I mean, it was like Deadsville. It's changed these days. It's changed. There's more people staying into the winter. And boy, do I remember being, when I was really young, first of all my cousins lived in Brooklyn. And I lived up here. And they used to come to the bungalow colony in Mountaindale. And I was always sad because I thought they all played when they went home, in Brooklyn, but they had to go to school and do their own things too. But I get so sad when everything would just shut down. And my grandfather, Sam Frishman, used to say to me, "You're the lucky one. You're the lucky one." And I didn't understand that until I got a little older and I realized what the country was all about. To this day, I always feel I was the lucky one that got to live up here all year round.
So he must have been in Fallsburg schools. Yeah.
So this is a postcard from Brown's Hotel, and they used to have the Brown Derby, which was, I believe, one of the coffee shops. And I just love the artwork and the style, how they put that derby right in the middle of the card. Does anybody know let's change that question. Does anybody know what the Lobbourne Hotel became? Very good.
Exactly.
The Aladdin Hotel. You must live near Woodburn. Yeah, it became the Aladdin. That was the original name of the hotel. And then they had
Well, it says Woodburn.
cool, they had the Alibaba nightclub. And towards the end, no, just a couple of years ago, I wasn't a building inspector anymore, but they were looking to save the building. And they asked me if I could get an engineer to do a sign off. That building was taken down. And that was it. I said, "You milked this building. There's nothing holding up the back wall. You're done. Are you sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." The Concord used to make their own printed sheets if you were gonna play gin rummy. And of course, every grandmother used to steal soap, towels.
I was gonna say, we have towels in the kitchen.
Oh, the keys.
Albert Hotel, and I really don't know where that is.
I've got a huge coat hanger collection from a bunch of hotels. Thank God everybody stole them so I could buy them now. Now, Irving Cohn was the maitre d' in the Concord for years. And I don't know who I was talking to recently. He was a waiter there, and
Needs help
told
with the
him I had
PowerPoint.
a bunch of these cards. He says, "Oh, I gotta get one from you." I said, so we exchanged addresses, and just got him at a yard sale in Monticello from somebody who lived there for a very long time, and it was an estate sale. Rosalind Sheriff, And I don't know if you knew her, but she had a huge collection. Somebody told me about it midday. Most of the stuff was gone. But again, I peeled through the box and I found some good stuff. So everybody knows Edie and Steve Lawrence, Edie Gourmet. This is one of the few menus, I think, that they printed with their picture on the cover. Because I have a lot of them. And this is the only one that I ever saw with stars on it. And of course, the inside of the menu.
Eddie
And
Gourmet and Steve Lawrence, Gourmet.
right side under where it says roast, you could just eat all of that, just keep asking for food. Whatever you wanted, duck and steak and turkey and native young fowl. That's just chicken, they make it sound good.
Native.
They had to make up different names to make it enticing. The reality was there was so much food that went out of those kitchens. Maybe that's part of the reason they went under, because they kept serving so much food. And all you had to do was ask, and they kept bringing it out. So this is towards the end of the Concorde's time, and they always had top-notch entertainment. So you had Jon Stewart. They spelled his name wrong, I'm told. He's a comedian, famous comedian.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
It's URH,
That's
if I'm not mistaken. And the
the
Village People,
village people.
they were hot back then. And the whole thing
60.
was that up here, everybody snuck into the hotels. If you knew somebody at the gate, you gave them $5, whatever it was. Everybody snuck in to see the entertainment.
Oh, it's the colors. They're looking for anything they can find.
And for the kids too.
Ah,
And
That's a
there's
good one.
real prime steak tidbits,
menu.
sauteed.
Kids menu with all the animals.
Now, I interviewed in it, and she's in my second book. She was a waitress in what she found out was she got a job in the children's dining room. Why? Because you'd have twice as many kids, instead of 30, you'd have 60, but you'd make the same amount of tips at the end. The good thing was they didn't complain that the soup was cold. They didn't say my steak is not right. They just ate spaghetti and grape juice. That's all they wanted. And if she kept bringing it out, they were happy. And she said, I didn't have to deal with all those old cranky people complaining about this and that. She was smart about it.
That's pretty good.
So they used to listen to the Mets or the Yankees on an old tube radio, and I didn't bring them
That's
in, but I've got a couple of rabbit ears that, used to send your kid up to the TV, move it this way, let me get some tin foil, and you put tin foil on the end, and you move it a little bit more to try
My
to get.
father's the antenna on the pictures.
And then you had transistor radios that changed things a little bit, you could walk around with it. And you might want to read something. I don't think you'd read this because this is just something that I have in my collection from 1894. It's a little outdated, but it does have some interesting articles. But I think more likely you might read this. Remember The Man from U.N.C.L.E.? That was a big TV show. Maybe the kids would read this. Maybe parents were into the spy thing back then. It was a cool
Doomsday Affair.
Now, the El Dorado Hotel, before it was the El Dorado, it was the Palms. Before it was the Palms, it was the, heard something, the Ziegler. It was a Ziegler to the Palms, and when it was the Palms, they used it as a dormitory for a couple of years. Sullivan County Community College used it as a dormitory. And then they got the fancy name, it went from, Ziegler, El Dorado, and ended as the Palms, and that's when it was the dormitory. Sign, somebody took off, and they brought it to the Sullivan County Museum. And somebody there said to me, you know what, Alan, we got this sign, and it's huge. You can't tell how big it is. It's like 10 foot long and about 6 foot tall. It's really big. And they said, we don't have room for it. You're the only person we know that would take it. I said, the deal is, you bring it, I'll hang it. And they brought it, and I said to my wife, I'm hanging up a sign on the side of the house, okay? And she said, you're hanging it on the side that I don't see driving in, right? Opposite side of the house, then I don't care. So it's a good thing because I couldn't store that sign, little too big. But it's a beautiful piece. It's got
So
a
this is
couple
the big
color
second.
thing on it. Try to save it. Here's a brochure from the El Dorado. A lot of them have the trifold brochures. And there's a famous picture. It's not this one. It was from one of the hotels, it might have been Kutcher's, where Wilt Chamberlain worked. And he's standing next to this guy who's even shorter than me. And the guy is just wearing the funniest outfit, but back then it was stylish. I should have added it to this. Very cute picture.
Yeah, should send in your photo.
And also what they would do is for the holidays, Passover holidays in particular, they would advertise these big cantors. Cantors are not rabbis, they're singers. And they would sing all the prayer.
Oh,
and
cantors.
got these famous guys to come in and they advertise for the Passover holidays, please come in. They've got, I can't even read it because it's fuzzy, but those two guys on top, and they would make it special. Now, what I found out later on was what the waiters would do in the big hotels is they would have a lottery. See, on Passover night, you're supposed to drink 4 glasses of wine. That's a tradition. So they'd be pouring the wine as needed. And what would happen is, eventually, somebody would pass out at the table. Whether their head fell into the plate, whether they slid under the table, they would pass out. And they all had a lottery whose table would have the person pass out first. Now, when you have a place like the Concord, you could make a killing if you had, because you wanted to make sure their glasses were full. No, I only want a half. You got to finish the wine. So they made sure that they got drunk enough so that somebody was going to
Hollywood
pass out.
bring bottles home.
Of course, Banachek. It's funny.
Should have
To this
saved-
day, I just
should have
like
saved
sweet
those.
wine. And I think it's because I was brought up on Manischewitz. Now, another story there's a whole section about waiters in the second book. Another time, a lady just passed out. I don't know why, it didn't matter. And she slid right under her table. Now, another young boy, he was in college, he was also studying to be an EMT. They called him over, Glenn, you gotta come here, we don't know what to do. Meanwhile, they called for an ambulance or something, but in the meantime, she's under the table. So they're eating dinner, okay? So imagine this. 4 waiters come over to lift the table, and there's an old Jewish lady sitting there eating the filter fish as they're moving the table. But she didn't want to miss a bite. I mean, the lady recovered, it was nothing much, but that lady was getting her money's worth. So these are the 2 books that I'm going to talk about next. The first book, Tales of the Catskill Mountain Plumber, took about 15 years to write. I wasn't really a writer, I'm a storyteller, and there's a big difference. And towards the end, I started getting better at it. My wife helped me edit. There's a lot of fights, to say the least, because when I thought it was ready for print, she said, I got to rewrite this book for you. So we spent the whole winter, mostly Saturdays, and I would take care of the housework and make a nice fire. And she would just keep fixing. And she was able to find all these things that were disconnected and this and that. So it's good. The English, if you're an English major, don't get on my case about that. The second one, more Borscht from the Catskill Mountain Plumber, is really stories of the stories that people told me about their experiences in the Catskills. Waiters, busboys, workers. Just a guy was He worked for a printer, and he delivered the menus to the hotels, and he brought in like, that week's menu. And one of the days was supposed to be potted brisket, but it came out rotten brisket. But it was too late to change the menu. They didn't have enough time. And, I'm sure the people that were there that week, rotten brisket, what the heck? I'm sorry, it's not rotten, don't worry. So, we're gonna end this part, and if somebody could flick on the lights. And I'm gonna read a couple things and tell you a couple stories, because we have time.
That must be Donna Steffens.
So that's part one. So part two is, I have some, what I feel are, by the way, does anybody know what this is?
Yeah, the xylophone.
No, this is a Catskill tool, hotel tool. This is what they use to applaud the acts. Okay, because they could keep a drink in one hand, they didn't have to put the drink down. And it would get really noisy when you think about it, like in the Concord, 2,000 people.
So did it have a specific name?
I call them Knockers. I don't know if there was another name, but I call them Knockers.
Canastus?
Knockers.
Knockers. Yeah,
So there's two favorite stories in the first book that I have to read to you.
Yeah.
Find them. Does anybody remember, if you're an old timer in Monticello, there was a butcher store, Lashinsky's? Okay, and there were three brothers, and that was like, they were like a comedy act. They would joke on each other. It was great going there just for the show. Friday afternoons were always busy in the mountains because of the upcoming weekend and having to prepare for Shabbos. The kosher butchers, of which there were many, were no exception. Lashinsky's, which was located on Broadway in Monticello, was overflowing with customers one Friday. So much so that their patrons congregated outside the store, waiting to hear their names called. One of the local year-round customers came by to place an order for a standard Friday night meal. When he saw all the tumult, he squeezed in the store and grabbed Leon, one of the owners, and said, "Leon, save me a barbecue chicken and I'll pick it up before you close." Leon's hands were soiled from just cutting some meat, so he told the customer that he would have Ethel, his wife, write it down for him. It was such a crazy afternoon, Leon forgot all about that. Several hours went by and it was almost Shabbos. The blinds in front of the shop were dropped down, signaling the store was closed. The Lashinsky boys, of which there were three, were exhausted from this exceptionally busy Friday. Just then, the local customer returned to pick up his order. As soon as he walked in the store, Leon realized he had forgotten to put aside a chicken. He immediately apologized profusely to the customer and offered to give him one of his fried chickens that he was taking home for his own family's meal. Fried chicken? Who eats fried chicken for a Shabbos meal? The customer complained. That's all I have left. What can I tell you? Leon said with a shrug. And with that, he took out one of the chickens from his own bag, placed it on the counter to cut it up, waited, rebagged it, and announced, "The chicken cost $6.25. The customer reached in his pocket and placed $6 on the counter. "That chicken's only worth $6, he said. Without missing a beat, Leon reached back in the bag, pulled out a drumstick, took a nice big bite, put it right back in, and justifiably said, "Now it's worth $6. Have a good Shabbos." The customer didn't say a word. He turned around with his bag of fried chicken, left the store, and Leon looked at one of his brothers and said, "And there goes another satisfied customer." True story.
Right.
guess they're not gonna shoot him.
When I was in Boy Scouts, and I was pretty active, there was a butcher in town, A.B. Wan. A.B. Wan invented the first TV dinner that was kosher that could go on an airplane, believe it or not. And he had a piece of chicken,
It's
and a
pretty
piece of
good.
kishka, and
Fish
maybe
cut.
a baked potato or another potato, something very simple.
2 starches.
2 starches, maybe 2. Maybe it was just the chicken in the kishket. So long ago, I don't remember. But it was called A.B. Wan's Heat 'em and Eat 'ems. That was the name. So one of his sons was in my Boy Scout patrol troop, and we were going on a big jamboree. I think it was in Ellsworth. People from all over were coming. He says, listen, give me the money. I'll buy all the food from my dad's freezers and everything. We'll have great food. We're like, yeah, that's a great idea. So we gave him the money. We're waiting to drive away. We had 2 trucks with tents and all the stuff. Where is he? Where is he? He finally shows up. He has 2 big coolers. We just threw him in the pickup truck. We're running late and we go there. First meal of the evening, we're making the fire. We open up the first cooler. A.B. Wan's Heat 'em and Eat 'ems. Open up the second cooler. A.B. Wan's Heat 'em and Eat 'em TV dinners. No bacon, no milk, no juice, no butter, nothing. Just 2 coolers full of A.B. Wan's Heat 'em and Eat 'em TV dinners. What are we gonna do? So we started going to the next troop. Here, listen, I got 5 TV dinners. You want to trade me some hamburger meat? You know? Yeah, okay. You know. We had to keep doing that to get food for the weekend. By the end of the jamboree, the troop masters are like seeing all these TV dinner pans and all the fires, wondering where the hell did they come from? We learned capitalism. We learned capitalism. They didn't give us an award, but let me tell you, we would have starved. Quite an experience. Let me go to the new book.
Well, somebody should correct that.
Marion Wind. Her family owned Pollock's Hotel in Ferndale. And I met her through my wife's family. And we
Yeah,
tell jokes to each other and tell great stories.
Alex, my father did do work there.
Marion Wint worked with her parents at their Ferndale hotel named Pollock's. She was a dear friend of mine who had a great sense of humor, which she said she got from her father. He would always share that with his guests to brighten up their day, or if not theirs, at least his. At one of the many family dinners, she shared some of her personal experiences with me. It was a busy weekend when a customer arrived for a short stay and requested something inexpensive for his family. The potential guest told her dad they didn't have a lot of money, but promised his wife and 2 kids a weekend in the Catskills. Based on his lack of finances, her father took the family to an affordable room. Every hotel had a main building, which was typically the original farmhouse. This inexpensive room was on the 3rd floor where the staff was usually housed. It was the best Mr. Pollock had to offer his financially limited guests. They climbed up the stairs, and as the heat continued to rise in the old uninsulated structure, Mr. Pollock opened the door for the family to take a look. Now remember, this wasn't one of the better rooms, but it was in his price range. He poked his head in and immediately explained, "This is a pigsty." Mr. Pollock looked him straight in the face and said, "So how many pigs will be staying here this weekend?" And that's what they did. I'm sure everybody knows Buddy Hackett.
Oh, yeah.
He was thrown out of a lot of hotels because he was so dirty, or bungalow colonies. The hotels kind of accepted it. But he was pretty dirty back then. But this is about him when he was younger and about his mother. Did you ever get called by the wrong name or a nickname that you just hated? Well, this was the case with, believe it or not, Buddy Hackett. I think most people know that he began his career performing in the mountains. But did you know that when he was younger, he stayed in a small bungalow colony in Spring Glen? I was told this story by Sherry Bigeliza, and she just started in Yiddish, going blah, 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 blah. I said, whoa, I'm not that good. You got to give it to me in English. So here's the translation in English. Buddy Hackett and his parents vacationed in Gendelman's bungalow colony. Not too big, but it had a nice crowd. His mom had a dog whose name was Pudgy. The dog was a bit on the chunky side. Excuse me. Sherry's grandmother also stayed at Gendelman's. Having come from the old country, She had a small problem with her English. Sometimes her memory and her hearing wasn't so sharp either. On many occasions, she'd see Mrs. Hackett around the colony and would always politely inquire about her son. So, Lou, how's your son Pudgy? Mrs. Wasserman, I keep telling you, I don't have a son named Pudgy. That's my dog's name. Mrs. Hackett, I'm so sorry. That's who I'm asking about. Your son, isn't his name Pudgy? I keep telling you, my son's name is Buddy and my dog's name is Pudgy. Several days later, Mrs. Wasserman got a nice big bone for Buddy's mom's dog and walked over to Hackett's bungalow. With a light knock on the screen door, Buddy's grandmother appeared. Hello, Mrs. Hackett, how are you? Fine, thank you. I was at the butcher's and he had a nice big bone. I told him I needed it for a very friendly dog. So here's a big bone for Buddy. Mrs. Wasserman, the dog's name is Pudgy and my son's name is Buddy. Listen to me, they almost sound the same. And you can call your son whatever you like. I'll call him Pudgy because he looks like a Pudgy, and the dog is so friendly, I'll call him Buddy. And that seemed to put the whole matter to rest. After hearing the story, I wondered what it would have been like to hear Johnny Carson introduce his next guest as Pudgy Hackett. So, I'm gonna tell you a joke now, because that's what the Tumblers used to do. They used to excite the crowds and give them laughter. So here's a nice Jewish joke. So these two old Jewish guys are sitting in Miami Beach, enjoying the day. Sam says to the other one, you know, Harry, I could tell you exactly how old you are, right to the day. He says, that's impossible, prove it to me. All right, take a t-shirt off. And he's looking at him, he says, I need a little more information. What kind of information? Just drop your trunks. What are you, crazy? I can't do that, we're on the beach. You're an old guy, nobody cares about old guys anymore, just do it. All right, drops his drawers, he looks at him, he says, let's see, you were born in 1939, May 17th. He says, oh my God, how are you able to do something like that? He says, schmuck, you told me yesterday. That's my job, make you laugh. I got more, don't worry. So this is an excerpt, I didn't mention that, I'm writing my third book called Gefilte Fish for the Soul. And know anybody that worked up here or lived up here, you know, during the time of the Borscht Belt, and you got a nice, funny story, and to make the cut, either I have to laugh or smile, okay? And then you might get into the book. So if you have some memories or know somebody that I'll share that story with you, and you let me know. And you can grab a card or something to stay in touch.
So I could say
The
as
third
a
book is Borscht
Christian
Belt,
kid
but some personal
riding
stories.
my horse in the
So it's a combination of all
amongst the
things. So this is a rough
see
draft,
them.
but I figured I'd share it with you.
It is kind of
Spanish Regents and Getting the Bends. Had a lot of
different.
talent that I used during high school.
I don't have anybody like that.
With my rock,
Riding bareback
or I'd build something cool.
on
for
Old
clients.
Smoky.
I'm not talking about a volcano here, people. For my project in the 6th grade, I built a scale model of the George Washington Bridge and received 2nd place. Now, learning a language was not my forte. My Spanish teacher was from North Carolina, so learning the language with her southern accent made it just a tad more difficult. I'm using this as an excuse. I had trouble learning English, let alone Spanish. I was barely making a D grade when it was time for the Regents exam. A good friend of mine was also having a not so easy time with Spanish. Now here's where my Jewish sechel came up with an ingenious solution to the exam procedure. Thank God the test was verbal with multiple choice. And don't do this at home ever. And don't tell your kids. So check out the plan. It was a young lady who was an A student and agreed to help us both, but not with studying together and cramming. That wasn't going to work at this point. Because they were going to call out 3 different answers to each question, all she had to do is bend down and the correct answer was spoken. For example, if B was the right answer, she bent down right after it was given, and out of the corner of our eyes, we could see what she was doing, and we knew it was B. This was great. It was a no-brainer. Well, we thought we beat the system. There was no way we were going to get caught on this. But as the questions got more and more complicated, she needed more time to figure out the correct answer. We were in the back row and started whispering, which one is it? Bend down, bend down. But she couldn't do that anymore since she needed more time to think about getting it right. For a little while, we thought there was just a lot of C answers, but soon realized we have a problem, Houston. Our foolproof method was no longer working for us, two fools. Getting her to bend at the right time was over. So my friend and I did the best we could and started answering blindly. When the grades came back and we both passed by the skin of our teeth, we all said, man, that was one stupid idea. One more in the
Thought there was gonna be.
in Mark, so just let me get it. You want to hear more stories or jokes? Both. This story is called Sex Education. Don't get nervous, don't get nervous. Sex Education 101. So don't get excited about the title because the event took place when I was about 11 years young. My parents were letting me stay for the weekend at Hemlock Grove, my favorite treat when I was growing up. I was going to be vacationing with my cousin Marty Fox. His bungalow was modest with a tiny open porch, small kitchen, dining, living room, and one large bedroom that had 3 beds, one for his parents, Harry and nurse Mary, his sister Arlene, and one for Marty that we were sharing that night. The young kids planned a Friday night campfire located next to the creek. Some of the mothers donated hot dogs and some a loaf of Wonder Bread, while others provided us with marshmallows, a main ingredient at any campfire. Then there was the most important item needed, a pack of matches. They probably weren't given to us, but since so many of our parents smoked cigarettes, they were quite easily attainable. As nighttime was nearing, some of us gathered by the big rock, which really wasn't so big, but it became a landmark as the entryway into the woods. This was going to be a boys-only night. This wasn't going to be a boys-only night, but a co-ed campfire. A bunch of girls also met us at the designated location, and off we went on our adventure. Little did I know what lay ahead. We crossed the bridge over the creek and we started smelling the distinct pungent odor of wood burning. Some of our friends had spilkus and left a little earlier to start the fire. I do want to mention that in both books, there's a schematic with Yiddish words translated. So you don't have to worry. If you don't know Yiddish, you read the back of the book, you get all the definitions. And they're funny. Spilkus is a word that Jewish people used for I don't know how many years. Today they call it ADD, but it's spilkus. It's the same thing. We could see the glow of the flames in the distance through the trees as we walked ever closer to our final destination. We picked up fallen branches as we entered the camp circle and threw them on the fire, making the flames crackle and jump almost 12 feet high. Not the safest thing to do, but honestly, I didn't know better. I wasn't even a building inspector yet. As the flames started to die down, we began cooking our incredibly nutritious dinner. After getting full from the hot dogs, marshmallows, and a bottle of orange mission soda, it was time for some storytelling and then game time. Now, I'm not referring to Monopoly, which was the favorite board game at Hemlock Grove. No, I'm talking about sex games. You know, like Spin the Bottle or 7 Minutes in Heaven. Well, it was my turn and I had to step up to the plate. I don't remember exactly which game we were playing at the moment, but I had to kiss Barbara E., which wasn't a bad thing at all. Only I was really, really shy. So we stepped off into the woods for a little privacy and the kissing started. But what kind of kiss was she giving me? She kept trying to push her tongue into my mouth. What the heck was that all about? Don't you know how to kiss on the lips? I kept thinking to myself. After a few more unsuccessful attempts of trying to open my mouth with her tongue, she gave up and that was it. We went back to join the rest of the group, some of whom had begun their own little rendezvous in the surrounding woods. A few hours passed and it was time to get back to the colony. I just kept thinking how weird it was how Barbara kept trying to push her tongue into my mouth. When we got back to Marty's bungalow, my Aunt Mary asked if we had fun, and we both blurted out in unison, "Of course." It was time to hit the sack, and after peeing in the toilet together and washing up, we crawled into his small bed while listening to the crickets and the cicadas singing outside. No one else was in the bedroom yet, so we quietly started whispering about the night's events. Naturally, I brought up the tongue thing that happened with Barbara. Marty proceeded to tell me that that was the way adults kissed, with their tongues. I couldn't believe it. I was shocked. Really? Yep, that's what they do, he replied convincingly. Hey, be quiet in there, boys, was the next thing I heard. So I turned over and fell fast asleep. At the next campfire, I was ready to take on the challenge. This time, when another young lady and I were chosen to kiss, I was quicker than she was to touch tongues. You know, it really felt good. I guess I paid attention during my first sex education class since this young lady commented on how good a kisser I was. Thanks, cousin Marty. So I'm gonna leave you with one more joke. And it's 3 o'clock, it's been about an hour. I have books for sale. Some of the items on the table are for sale. There's some menus, brochures. Certain items are listed as not for sale because they're one of a kind. And if you buy a book, you get a menu from the Concord Hotel. So I'm gonna leave you with this last joke. Now I'm a Borscht Belter, so all my jokes are about Jews. So there's a Jewish couple, and the wife is very, very obese, but she likes to sleep naked. Husband, in the middle of the night, goes to the bathroom, forgets to put the toilet seat down. That's the worst thing a guy could do. Forgets to put the toilet seat down. About an hour later, she walks up, she goes to the bathroom, she sits down. The suction is so great, she can't get off the toilet. She's yelling, Mike, get in here, you didn't put the seat down. And they're tugging, and they're tugging. What are we gonna do? You can't get me off the toilet. I think we need to call a plumber. I waved it in for a plumber. I think we need to get a plumber. How can you get a plumber? I'm naked. He says, look, you cover up like this, you'll take my yarmulke and you'll put it over here, it'll be fine. Plumber comes 20 minutes later, middle of the night, but it's an emergency. He's looking, he's thinking, well, can you help us? He says, listen, I can definitely get your wife off the toilet, but there's no way I'm pulling out the rabbi. I see this, I see what. Okay. One more for the road. One more for the road. It's not a Jewish joke. Okay, here we go. This lady works in, I should just told jokes for an hour. This lady works in an old age home. She comes to work one day. There's Mr. McDonald. He's walking around in the hallway. He's still in his pajamas, got a very sad face. She walks over. Mr. McDonald, what's the problem? What's the problem? Oh, I had a rough night last night. My penis died. She said, what the? You know, she doesn't think anything of it because they're all a little kooky. Next day she comes back to work and there he is. And he's completely exposed from the waist down. Mr. McDonald, what are you doing? You can't walk around like that. Oh, remember I told you the other night when my penis died? Yeah. Today's the viewing. All right. So before I lose you, I'm going to say thank you for coming out.